people would be joining. Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the XLRI XPGDM Leadership Talk Series. Today, we have Mr. Rahul Awasthi with us to share his wonderful and deep insights about the competitive advantage of the supply chain. Mr. Awasthi is currently the Executive Vice President at Dabur India Limited, an experienced supply chain professional with a demonstrated track record in the FMCG industry in manufacturing, technology, innovation, and supply planning domain. He has done multiple strategic and execution roles in top companies. He possesses deep expertise in manufacturing, outsourcing, supply and distribution planning, manufacturing excellence, innovation, sustainability, and quality. Sir, we are pleased to have you here with us. Over to you, sir.
Hi, Shweta and the guest speaker team of XLRI. First of all, I want to thank you all for inviting me to speak with all of you. Let me say that I have a very high regard for people of XLRI. I work with quite stellar people who are the earlier alumnus of XLRI. You must have heard and read in LinkedIn about Amrita Patta and many other people in Hindustan Unilever and many other companies I had a privilege to work with. So really my privilege to speak to all of you. What I plan to do is that I will share you some of my thoughts on supply chain, about the environment we are currently in and the changing disruptive environment all around us. So I will give you some perspective on that. And I will also then share with you that how we can make supply chain great, because the times are changing very, very rapidly. Supply chain earlier used to be seen as a support function. However, recently supply chain brings so much on table that it can be a true growth enabler for any organization. And what are the levers to play for that to happen, I will share with you. So this entire PPT is not very big. It is around 10-12 slides. And I will share my thoughts in around half an hour, 35-40 minutes. And then we will open it for any question and answer you may have with me. Yeah, Shwetab, can you just move to the next slide? So before we actually go to the supply chain, I want to share with you, we are operating in a world which is changing, and it is changing very, very fast. Just hold on, Shweta, but just go to one at a time. Yeah. So there are number of parameters which are impacting this entire environment. Let us talk about geopolitical landscape first. In today's world, I don't think any supply chain is a local supply chain. Whether it is a multinational company, whether it is a local company, the supply chain truly is a global supply chain, because in many companies, the product comes from other countries to be sold in the local market. If that is not the case, at least the raw material or the spare parts for the various machines come from different nations globally. And hence geopolitical landscape plays a very, very important role in deciding how supply chain has to function and how supply chain can add value. You all are aware of the geopolitical tensions happening across the globe. So tension between India and Pakistan, tension between India and China. There is a lot of happening in the Middle East. Recently, the condition is in turmoil between Pakistan and Afghanistan and India. So same situations keep on happening. And these geopolitical situations really impact supply chain in a big way. Go to next, Shweta. The second parameters which impact supply chain is the socio-economic condition of the country. So how the economy is doing, what are the prevailing conditions in various countries in social domain, in economic domain. Recently, all of us are aware of what COVID has done to the economies of many, many countries. All these parameters impact performance of companies, impact performance of supply chain. So whenever we design supply chain, it has to keep in mind the socio-economic condition as well. At the same time, we are seeing a huge digital disruption across the value chain of an organization. So whether it is consumer landscape, all of you and many people in Gen X, Gen Z are really very consumers digital savvy, and that has a lot of impact in deciding the channels in which companies operate. So particularly in the FMCG sector, the growth in general trade will be a little different than growth in modern trade. Modern trade is growing much faster. In recent time during COVID, we have seen huge amount of uplift in e-com section because people want to buy from their home, from the safety of their home. And this is causing huge challenges in front of supply chain in supporting those channels. Not only channels, what is happening, digital disruption is happening in the type of machine, type of manufacturing, because of that huge amount of data is coming, and hence the entire supply chain require a lot of big data analytics, lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning to function effectively. Go ahead, Sweta. Along with all this, all of us are aware that sustainability is a very important factor playing out in consumers' mind and various governments of the countries. And they want companies to be sustainable. They want companies to be responsible. All the growth has to happen keeping in mind that you are not polluting the environment, keeping in mind that the labor practices which we adopt in our companies are sustainable labor practices and fair labor practices. And this also has a very important role to decide the performance of a supply chain. So whenever, as a leader or as any true supply chain professional, we need to design and we need to progress our supply chain, all these parameters and comes into play. A lot more than this, but these are the top 4 to my mind. Go ahead. Now, in this context, all of us as a leader, whether we work in supply chain, whether we work in business environment, in marketing, HR, in whichever domain we want to operate in, because the world is changing so fast, we cannot sit on our laurels and say, I have done very well in the past. That doesn't provide any guarantee that we are going to do equally well or better in the future to come. And it will require a very different skill set and very different kind of organization design to ensure that the organization and supply chain will be successful in tackling the challenges of the future. Now, before we go to various levers, let me just explain to you how supply chain operates in a very simple way. So any supply chain, when you talk about a company, the company can be producing goods like a FMCG company or a car industry, automobile industry, or a chemical industry. They produce goods. Or equally, there are service companies like Amazon, like Zomato, or each of these companies have their different supply chain. So what essentially supply chain do, it is a complete value chain of supply chain wherein you source your material or you source your service. So if you are a manufacturing company, the raw material you have to source, the source of that raw material can be local, it can be global. Similarly, if it is a service company, you source your services or you source your manpower to do those services for you, comes under source domain. When you source those raw material, then it comes to make. It comes to the factories, it comes to the warehouses, and then you process that material through manufacturing. And finally, once you convert it into goods or final service, it needs to be delivered to consumer in a right way to delight the consumer. Now, all these legs of source, make, and deliver is underpinned by the planning process. Go, Shweta. So the planning is predominant in all source, make, and deliver functions. So any supply chain will have 4 verticals within that supply chain. The first vertical is planning. Now that planning can be demand planning, planning can be supply planning, that planning can be distribution planning. But the planning function is integral to the entire value chain of supply chain. And then the other 3 verticals are source, make, and deliver. So in the other picture, if you see we have depicted the entire supply chain model wherein raw material has to be sourced. Raw material will then some of the raw material which is agri kind of raw material which doesn't require processing will directly go to the factories. If it requires processing, it goes to the supplier where it is processed, and the semi-finished goods then go to the manufacturing unit. From manufacturing unit, it goes to distribution. The distribution again can be primary distribution, secondary distribution, tertiary distribution, depending on the design of your supply chain. Then it goes to retail location where it comes face to face with the moment of truth, where the consumer first time see your product and decide whether to buy that product or not. And then finally it is sold. Go ahead, Shweta. Now, what are the enablers for effective functioning of a supply chain? The first deliverable of a supply chain is quality. So the organization produce goods. The goods should be produced in such a way that it should delight a consumer. Now, quality has two aspects. One aspect is a quality in design. Another is quality of delivery. Quality in design is the way the R&D teams design a product, whether the design itself is meeting consumer expectation or not. The another aspect which supply chain controls is quality in delivery. So when you make that product in our factory, there should not be any defect generation, and our quality has to ensure that it delight consumer. The second major parameter for any supply chain is service. The entire supply chain focuses on servicing consumer in the right way, and the service should satisfy the consumer. And when consumer is satisfied, what he looks for in satisfaction, it should reach the consumer at the right time and at the right place. These are the two various parameters on which service is judged. The third most important aspect which supply chain controls is the cost. It is not that while you are delivering quality, you are delivering service. It can be at any cost, because consumers are very, very cost conscious, and hence we need to optimize cost to ensure that we provide value for money to the consumer. This is the third most important aspect of any supply chain. The fourth and another important aspect is cash. So the supply chain may be very good in delivering quality. It may be very good in delivering service. It may be very good in delivering cost. Still, your organization can be bankrupt because a supply chain doesn't manage cash. When we are talking about cash, the cash of the company is blocked in the inventory of the organization, and hence supply chain need to be designed in a way that the working capital required to run the operation is very, very optimum. And hence, in a volatile time, company has enough cash to run operations. Yeah. Now, all this is not possible unless organization is very, very conscious in managing safety, health, and sustainability. And these are the three parameters which are actually licensed to operate parameter. Unless an organization maintains safety of their employee, safety of their operation, health of their operation, health of their employee, and environmental sustainability, you are not polluting the environment, it cannot run in a longer way. The society and the administration and the country in which you are operate in will make you stop your operation, and hence we consider that as license to operate. So foundation of any supply chain is license to operate, then quality, service, cost, and cash. And when any supply chain actually manages all these five, supply chain actually becomes a true enabler for growth. Yeah. Go ahead, Shweta. Now, let us discuss about what is the meaning of survive and thrive. And I have made this circle depicting a external context of a supply chain. So when supply chain or company operate, there is always an influence of environment on this. So suppose take a time of COVID when the socio-economic condition of the country is very, very bad, or suppose take example when we had a conflict with China, where your material is not coming, or suppose a country is in a state of war with another country, the condition of the country and external environment of the country is so challenging that organization will have to go into a survival mode. And hence the inner circle is a survive circle. Your organization should be designed in a way that it can survive. And what are the levers at play if an organization or supply chain need to survive? So first lever is resilience, and I will talk about it in detail in coming slide. The another lever which has to be available for supply chain and the organization is flexibility. Both these levers are helping organization and supply chain to survive in an environment where there are a lot of headwinds. Okay. Now, exactly opposite time, if there are a lot of tailwinds in the environment, economy is doing very well, there is peace in the country, there is no election happening, there is no COVID, there is no external influences in the organization, entire country is on the roll. Those are the time when an organization and supply chain will have to switch the mode and exactly go into thrive mode. Along with resilience and flexibility, the another aspect and lever the organization and supply chain has to have is agility. When all these parameters, resilience, flexibility, and agility are available to any supply chain or any organization, it can effectively switch between survival mode and thrive mode. Now we will go into more detail of what these levers are. So let us talk about resilience. An organization has to have resilience in many parameters. So first is portfolio. When we talk about portfolio, think about a scenario where an organization is making only premium beauty product. Okay. And suddenly COVID happened and lockdown is declared. If organization's portfolio is purely dependent and business is purely dependent in a portfolio wherein it can only cater on beauty product, the complete need for that beauty product is wiped out. Or take an example when a company is only making ice cream. Now that product is purely dependent on freshness. And after the lockdown, there is no consumer actually buying that product. And your entire company survival become very difficult. Hence, it is very important for the organization actually to have a portfolio which is a diverse portfolio. You are operating in many products. At the same time, you are also operating in a various segment of your consumer pyramid. So many times when income of people take a beating, consumer migrate from a high value product to a product which offers more value for money. For that scenario, your portfolio should be such that the organization can operate in a top end scenario. The organization has product in the middle end consumer segment, and organization also has a product to offer to the mass population of the country. The second area where there should be full resilience is sourcing. You have seen many companies shut their shop because most of the raw material for those companies was coming from China. And before COVID, when the first wave hit China, the entire supply from China has completely dried up. And many industries, particularly semiconductor industry, particularly industry which are dependent on chemicals which are coming from China, they have to shut shop there because there is no raw material available to make their product. And hence it is very important that the company really have a foresight to build their RM sourcing plan in such a way that you are sourcing your material from multiple sources, so that when time comes, you have more options available on the table. The third area where resilience is required is manufacturing and distribution. Yeah, because your footprint should be such that many times the organization has faced challenges where they're one of the big manufacturing factory come into the containment zone. Or there are some riots happening in that particular area and administration has imposed a curfew. Now in that scenario, you cannot operate that manufacturing plant. So what is your alternate strategy of making that product at some other factory? you should have business contingency plan available for both your manufacturing and distribution, because your depots, your mother depots can be completely shut. In that time, the organization should have resilience to actually transform their distribution system to source from the alternate manufacturing location or alternate depots. The last area where resilience required is community. So how engaged we are with the community, because gaining the trust of community is very, very important to operate your companies or your supply chain or your factories in their particular area is very, very important. So every organization should have very good connect with community, to local administration, so that they allow you to operate in a tough environment as well. Yeah, Shweta, go ahead. The second important lever which helps company in both difficult times as well as times which are good is flexibility. So as an organization, whether your services or formulation is flexible. Now take an example wherein one of the product which a company is making, the raw material is coming from a single source, and that source is not available anymore. Can you make the same product with a different formulation? Is a formulation flexibility or service flexibility. Similarly, manufacturing flexibility. You have one plant which probably makes one type of product, and the need of that product in market completely vanishes. Will you be shutting that manufacturing facility because people are working there? There are fixed overheads of that factory, and it will create an extra burden for the organization. So our manufacturing should be designed in a way that it should be able to flexibly produce multiple products in the same hardware. And if that flexibility is available, you can really leverage that manufacturing facility to make multiple products, so that you can fulfill demand in a difficult time. The third flexibility is the distribution flexibility. You are sending material from source X to destination Y. Now, how you distribute that product? It can go either through transport through road, it can go through sea, it can go through rail. All these modes of transportation should be available, and probably you are not using it in good times, because those may be costlier options. But if those lanes are active, at least it can help you if because of flood. Take an example, if there is one factory in Calcutta and you are producing the material and sending it to Assam, during rainy seasons, many times there is flooding in river Brahmaputra, and Assam completely shuts off from the entire country in that time. How you distribute your product in Assam in those times, you should have thought through, and you should have flexibility in distribution to cater to that consumer need. Yeah. Go ahead, Shweta. The third lever is agility, and this lever actually comes into play when the times are good. An organization want to thrive. Yeah, it is not that it is not useful in the difficult times, but the use of this lever is maximum when the times are tough. So organization should be very, very agile. How it go to market? Go to market means how you distribute your product from your one end of supply chain to another end of supply chain. So the location of your factory should be near the market, so that you can transfer your goods very, very quickly, so that when the demand fluctuation is there, while the demand planning team and supply planning team do a lot of planning, in the time when the times are good, you will see sudden surge in demand. And if your factory is very near to the market, the ability of the organization to service those demands raises manifold. At the same time, what it does is it reduces your inventory in the supply chain, because most of the material will be either in the factory or it will be in the trade, and hence the material on wheel is very, very limited, and your working capital will be minimum and available to invest behind your brands to add value to the consumer. The second agility which is required in innovation. When the times are good, consumer wants a lot of choices, and that forces many organizations, whether it is an automobile company, whether it is a FMCG company, to innovate very, very quickly, and the market will be captured by the company which innovates quicker than the competition, because it allows consumer to have many choices, and then they go for the right choices, and the company can gain out of this. The third agility which is required is the pricing agility, and it is also very, very important to have. Just think about a scenario wherein the crude prices for last 2 years, crude prices were just going up and up and up, and a company have a packing material wherein the pricing is printed. Now when the crude prices suddenly goes up and company buys their raw material at the higher prices, if you have packaging material available on the shop floor which has the earlier pricing, you will have no choice but to offer the product to the consumer at the same old MRP while your input cost has changed. And that really significantly impacts your profitability of the organization. And hence it is very, very important that how fast we can change the pricing of our product. It goes in the reverse way as well. Many times what happens is there is a softening of commodity price and your old MRP is higher. In that scenario, what happens is if the competition company changes or reduces the prices faster than you in the market, then you lose out. Consumer will obviously buy the product which are cheaper to them, and the complete market can be wiped out. Yeah. The fourth aspect of agility is people and culture. And this is again, a lot of you, particularly in HR, will be very, very interested in that, because when the context or external environment changes, we should have people whose capability and competencies are flexible. Suddenly when COVID struck, we found that many organizations has really gone to work from home mode. There was no other option. There are one set of people who are in manufacturing. We have no option because they have to go to the factory to produce the product. But a lot of people who are in marketing, in sales, in HR, many corporate people actually can work from home. But that require a very different kind of skill set of those people to manage in an environment which is a virtual environment. And also, we require a culture which is much more agile and trusting. Because if the organization value is such that you need to completely supervise people to gain productivity, it is completely not suitable for a work from home kind of environment. And hence the organization and supply chain has to be in has an environment which has a culture of flexibility or agility in its people. Yeah, go ahead. Now, any leader of supply chain, if we have an optimum balance of all these three levers, and I talked about three levers, one was resilience, another was flexibility, and third was agility. If any organization has all these three levers at an optimum level available, it can really operate in a zone where there is a sweet spot between survive and thrive. It can operate in an environment wherein even in the tough condition, the organization will not only survive, but it will thrive. Yeah, go ahead, Shweta. Now, there is a price to pay for this, and there is a trade-off involved. Okay, so for resilience, for flexibility, for agility, it can be generated in the organization, but it has to be at a cost. For resilience, the organization has to pay a cost and organizational energy. Similarly, is for flexibility and agility. So as a leader, as an organization, the organization has to really make a right strategy as to how much to invest behind resilience, flexibility, and agility. Because if you have too much resilience, too much flexibility, too much agility, it will happen at a cost, and that cost has to be borne by a consumer, and consumer may not be willing to pay in good times for those capabilities. And hence, we should have an optimum balance between these three parameters versus cost to really design a supply chain which is very optimally designed and can both survive and thrive in both kind of environment. Yeah. So that's all I have to share with you. Now I will leave it to people to really ask if they have something to ask me. Yeah. Thank you.
It was really a nice session, sir. So now I would like to request Yash to moderate the question answers session. Yes, over to you.
Sure. So, people with questions, can you please raise your hands? Yeah, Niharika, go ahead.
Hello, sir. Good evening. First of all, thank you so much, sir, for taking your precious time for all of this and making us so much more knowledgeable about supply chain domain. So my question was, in the time of rising geopolitical tensions across the world, sir, would collaborative supply chain strategy be the next way forward for supply chain domain?
Yeah, definitely means. So there are two things which any supply chain has to do. One is that if you have a supply chain which is truly global, you should have contacts and collaborations available across the political spectrum in the countries from where your entire sourcing happen or your service are sourced. At the same time, there are times when even after right collaboration, there is no other way. You cannot get, like take an example of COVID, wherein if your material is coming from China and their entire manufacturing is shut, you cannot source it from there. So it has to be designed in a way that when the time really gets tough, you have alternate sources available, or you need to preempt that situation to happen, and you need to upstock your inventory. So this is completely a dynamic game, which is a factor of collaboration with various countries and government. At the same time, designing the supply chain in a way that even if the time become worst and even after collaboration, it is not working, you should have alternates available with you.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, Praveen.
Hello, sir. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Sir, you said that innovation is required in today's scenario. Sir, but if you are innovating very frequently, the cost of product increases. So what is the process to find optimum point?
Okay. So first of all, innovation increases cost is a misconception. I don't agree with this. Innovation means doesn't add value to the product. Innovation is understanding the consumer needs and provide that in a right value for money kind of way. Take an example wherein probably I will give you an example of a FMCG industry. You must have seen, if you see the environmental sustainability analysis of our product, you will find that the maximum usage of water happens in the value chain by the consumer. It doesn't happen in manufacturing, because if take an example of a detergent powder, you use certain amount of water in your factories in making your raw material, but maximum amount of usage of water happens by the consumer when he washes clothes. Okay. So organization will brainstorm, and it can provide a competitive advantage if we give a detergent powder or bar to a consumer which requires less water for rinsing. It will ease the life, because in places like Chennai, each bucket of water will require a lot of effort from a consumer, and hence you have to add something in your product which reduces foam. Yeah. Now that kind of technologies are available in the market, not at a very high cost. You can still keep your cost very optimum and provide better value to the consumer. So in some of the cases where innovation do increase cost, but again, there are people who are willing to pay that cost if the product become better. So as a marketeer, as a supply chain team, we always do that analysis before launching a product, whether the cost which I am increasing or not increasing, consumer should be willing to pay for that value increase in that product. Yeah. Hope it answers your question, Praveen.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Sarveshwar.
Sir, I just want to ask you, like, what are the challenges that we face in India? That is the supply chain constraints, like in terms of transport facilities. How the government is actually creating new infrastructures, like, we have dedicated freight corridors that is going on, and the government is trying to set up ports, and we have new ports coming up down in near Chennai, and government is also setting up warehouses and so on. And what do you feel are the new infrastructure development that the government must bring in order to boost up this sector? because this is definitely going to be the backbone of the future manufacturing sector in India. So,
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. This is an area which is actually underexploited at this point of time. If you see the value chain of many companies, take an example of a product like ice cream, which is a cold chain process, wherein you have a factory probably in east of India and you are sending material to some other remote part. Your entire cold chain, the truck which goes is a refrigerated truck, but when it comes back empty, and it is a huge cost. So organization and government actually has to work together to develop reverse logistics for this, so that when the truck actually goes to some other place, it should not come empty. It should collaborate with some other industry or through government. But it is a very nascent area. So companies like Unilever, I work there, actually runs a control tower kind of concept, wherein we collaborated, or Unilever at that time collaborated with sister organization, even with competitor organization, I would say, wherein if your transportation is happening for your finished goods from one area to another area, and in that particular area, if a factory of another company is situated and it requires truck, can you collaborate so that the transportation cost of both the companies reduces? So those are the initial thought. Another challenge in this domain is actually the worst job in our country today is a life of a truck driver, because once he goes out of his home for 5 days, 6 days, he doesn't know where I will be. So there are companies like Rivigo. Maybe you have heard the name of Rivigo. It is a very innovative company which started a startup wherein your truck will go all the way, but your driver will rotate. So if there is a driver in Madhya Pradesh, it will take truck from one place to the end of Madhya Pradesh, and it will hand over the truck to another driver of the same company. Yeah. Now this is also a potential wherein the cost of your driver, because they pay then driver the night allowance, he has to spend money because he is out of home, he is very frustrated, he will just put his truck somewhere else and sleep. In the transport industry, the biggest cost is the cost of asset, cost of truck. Like a airline industry, you must have seen the company which are profitable ensure that your aeroplane should always be in the air. But that is only possible if you can rotate your pilot or rotate your driver. That is another area where government and organization need to work together. But I agree with you, it is a very nascent area, very high potential, but nascent.
Thank you, sir. Vipul?
Hi, Vipul.
Hello, sir. Sir, as we see now, the disruption in supply chain management for automotive industries, they are now not able to get the raw material for chips. So what is the learning for FMCG company, and what you think will be the pinpoint in FMCG company if the same cases arises for FMCG companies?
Yeah. So what is happening in FMCG, if you see dependence of lot of FMCG company was on China, particularly on chemical. There is a lot of linear alkyl benzene, which is a petroleum product. There are a lot of refineries in China, which used to come from China. Similarly, there are a lot of value added products, because even companies like Dow Chemicals or many companies which are European companies or US companies have their manufacturing set up in China. Yeah. So when this entire pandemic started, all companies were struggling to get their raw material, and companies like Unilever, like many other good companies, like Dabur, all these companies have formulation available wherein they can change slight tweaking in the formulation, still deliver good value to the consumer, but do not add that raw material wherein the dependence was on China. Yeah. However, now companies have realized that this is a very big problem areas. US companies, UK companies, and they are now spreading their footprint. So you must have seen there are a lot of manufacturing now getting transferred to other countries in Southeast Asia, from China to Vietnam to Myanmar, so that their own, while the cost of production, why they put their factories there? Because the cost of production in that factory is very less, because the manpower is cheap. The scale of China, both in terms of infrastructure, power availability, is very, very cheap. but the same facility or same thing is available in Bangladesh, same facility is available in Myanmar. So you will see, or the organization will see, the basis of the large companies shifting to multiple locations. Even in India, a lot of industries like Aditya Birla Group, many chemical industries are investing behind making soda ash in India, making enhancing their capacity of linear alkyne benzene production in India, so that we have our own resilient supply chain and we do not depend entirely on countries like China, wherein they will always remain volatile. Because of China's ambition of expansion, it will have at loggerhead with many countries, including countries in Europe and North America. And hence, the companies, if they have to survive, will have to shift their sourcing strategy from completely China-based sourcing strategy to a more robust and widespread sourcing strategy.
Thank you, sir. Archita?
Hello, sir.
Hi.
Good evening.
Yeah.
My question is not towards supply chain. My question is towards the product part of Dabur. So Dabur is mostly famous for its Ayurvedic products or natural ingredients products. So when a company like Patanjali or these Indian products came into the picture, what was the effect of it on Dabur particularly?
So it is not that Patanjali is the only Ayurvedic player which is there in the field. You must have seen even before Dabur, Baidyanath was in the market. Zandu is in the market. Okay, and Dabur is also a 140-year-old company. So it has a very, very good brand image in the minds of consumer, particularly in Ayurveda space. Yeah. So even now, if you see, while I have not spent too much time, I just spent around a month in Dabur right now. But if you see the product category right now, there are, even in Ayurveda, there are two types of product. Like one product is a OTC product, like Chyawanprash, which is not a medicine. It is not prescribed formulation. Consumer buy it for immunity without any prescription. It is available on medical shops. It is also available on the FMCG stores. However, there are few type of product which are prescription drugs, like which is prescribed by Ayurvedic doctor. The portfolio of many companies is not very, very robust in that segment, which is prescribed by the doctor, because doctor only prescribe medicine from the company which has full range of your product. If you see Ayurvedic medicine product, there are roughly 340 medicines which are available. Even with such scale, Dabur operates only in 230 categories right now. There are 130 medicines which are still Dabur doesn't make. Some other competition makes. So always you need to expand your portfolio so that you have a better variety of product ahead of your competition. This is one kind of strategy to maintain and keep your product at the topmost. So the manufacturing process of those products are complete Shastri process. So you may not be aware, but there are Shastri products which has to be made in exactly the same way how it is written in Shastra. And Dabur ensures that always for all their products that it should be made from a Shastri process, so that when a Ayurvedic practitioner prescribes it, he is 100% confident that whatever benefits Ayurveda promises, it is there in the product. So that is one strategy. Another strategy, if you have seen recently Dabur, it is really investing a lot in the other categories which is other than Ayurveda. So you must have heard about a product called Real. Have you heard, Archita? So Real Juice. Real Juice is a Dabur product. It is a nectar actually. Nectar is not a fruit juice. Juice doesn't have a huge content of actually fruit pulp. But nectar, if you drink a Dabur Real, you will feel that you are actually drinking Goa, or you are actually drinking some pulp or fiber, because the amount of nectar in that formulation is around 40%. And Dabur is the biggest player. The entire market is roughly 1800 crore market in India. And Dabur is 60%. Tropicana is 20% only, which is a Pepsi brand. So Dabur, while it is said it is a Ayurvedic company, roughly 40 to 45% turnover even right now comes from category other than Ayurveda. And Dabur is expanding big time in those categories. Dabur is a product which is there in non-Ayurvedic, it is in home and personal care. So you must have heard about Odonil.
Hmm.
Odonil is a Dabur product. Odopic is a Dabur product. So Dabur, while has a very big play in Ayurveda, it is also expanding big time in juices. It is expanding big time in home and personal care as well.
So my question was related to a little bit on Patanjali was sudden into the market, right? And it took away a share of Dabur, which was previously entirely a bit focused on Dabur, that we can very easily see. But there is no.
But that is not the case, because Dabur, if you see, Dabur growth is highest in the FMCG industry last year during COVID. Company like Unilever has grown by 4%, Dabur has grown by 18%, because the entire market is expanding. So people are becoming more Ayurveda conscious, and hence there is a scope for many players to play. Dabur as a leader is expanding the market. If you just follow in LinkedIn, you follow in any social media, Dabur is actually the leading, because we are leading. It is a responsibility of the company to expand the market. And when the market expands, it creates a lot of value for other players to come, but still you can grow within your core category.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Jagan.
Hello, sir.
Hi,
Thanks
Jagan.
for your insightful discussion, sir. Sir, when I was checking your LinkedIn profile, I came to know that you served as a TPM manager for HCL South.
Yeah.
So, when I was searching about this particular TPM is nothing but total productive maintenance thing, and it can be summarized by the slogan called maximum effects with minimum investments. Can you throw some insights on this particular strategy, sir?
So TPM is actually one of the tool in the entire manufacturing excellence. So manufacturing excellence is the methodology by which you can really exploit the efficiency of your plants. Now, many companies like GE follow Six Sigma. Many of you must have heard about Six Sigma. Many companies like Unilever, like Dabur, like many other automobile companies follow TPM, which is total productive maintenance, which is a Japan-based methodology. Six Sigma is a US-based methodology. TPM is a Japan-based methodology. There are many other methodologies as well. But the ultimate objective of these methodology to really unlock the efficiency of the plant. Now, how you unlock efficiency of the plant? By improving the efficiency of your machines. So right now, if a machine is operating at 60% efficiency, TPM can take it to 85-90% efficiency. If your energy consumption is X amount, you can make the same product in 10% lesser thing. And how you achieve that is that TPM forces you to identify losses. You can never increase your efficiency unless you are aware of the losses which are happening. So entire TPM philosophy of JIPM is based on understanding the losses in a plant and really use the focused improvement tools. And I cannot tell you in great detail, but there are tools available like PM analysis, like Viva analysis, like Ishikawa diagram, like Pareto analysis. There are many tools available which can be utilized to understand those losses and work on those losses to reduce, to unlock plant efficiency. This is in nutshell the methodology of TPM.
But as per your experience, is there any particular tool that you have used, very frequently in your practical exposure?
In my view, if you ask me, the simplest tool is the most effective tool, and it is called a Viva analysis tool. So when you keep on asking questions, so suppose I will give you a simple example ki malaria kyun hua tha. Take example of you are doing how a person got malaria. Okay, the first thing which will come is he is bitten. That gentleman is bitten by a mosquito. Okay, the general tendency is that you put mosquito repellent and the things will be solved. This is a wrong philosophy. You have to keep on asking why till you go to root cause. So in that example, you ask why mosquito is there. So somebody will tell mosquito is there because outside your home there is pond of water where water is accumulated. Now, the question to ask is why that water is accumulated? Because there is a big hole, and that's why when there is a rainy season, water accumulates and there is no drainage system. Then you say why there is no drainage system? Because it is not designed properly. So TPM tells you to really correct the drain so that even in the next rainy season, water doesn't get clogged and mosquito will not born at all. In any other methodology, people will keep on putting Odomos, or people will keep on using the mosquito repellent, but the malaria will keep on happening. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Utkarsh, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your, insightful information, and sir, definitely bringing Dabur ahead, which is basically a brand which is on the lines of Ayurveda. My question to you is, sir, Dabur has, set its roots in every other sector, but why exactly Dabur has not established its roots in dairy products like milk, precisely?
So every organization has its expertise, and while it is very, very glamorous to say that if the company is successful in Ayurvedic product or other FMCG product, it will be successful in dairy as well. Because in dairy product, there is Amul available, there is many competitors available. When you enter into those category, you will be up against a very, very established player in that category. And to really fight that battle, you need a lot of money and organizational resources. So organization always keep on really making those strategic choices that what is the right time and right market to enter in. You must have seen two type of strategies where there is one organization which keep on expanding. There are many organizations which keeps on consolidating because they want to focus their strategies in the existing market where there are expertise available. Yeah. So it is not always a successful strategy to expand your footprint and keep investing. Take an example of ITC. Yeah, I will give you a completely different example. ITC is a major player in cigarette. The major amount of money comes from cigarette business. Right now, they are building their FMCG business. But I can tell you, because we were a fierce competitor with ITC when I was in Unilever. Last 10 years of operation, they are not making any money in FMCG business. They are just pumping in money to establish that business because of a strategic intent. They want to convert their image from a cigarette company to a FMCG company, because tomorrow, if there is a legislation against banning cigarette, or if the taxes on cigarette becomes too high, they will have a business on which they can really depend on. That's why for last 10 years, they are funding their cigarette profits to run that business. But that may not be a very right strategy for many companies, wherein the profitability of other part of the business is not very high. ITC can afford that strategy because they earn 60% margin from cigarette business and it is huge profit coming in. And they can afford to do that. Dabur, right now, the size of business of Ayurveda, is it big enough? Or they generate profits so high that they can invest in entering a new category? I'm not sure at this point of time. Yeah. Does it answer your question? I don't know.
Thank you, sir. That really answers the question. Thank you very much.
Anya?
Hello, sir. Thank you for your insightful session. So I have one small doubt. Like we often see that few minutes ago also we were discussing that for certain items demand falls and unpredictably, like whatever we forecasted, it goes in totally the different direction. So in that case, if there is such a fall, how do we leverage the supply chain management systems to ensure that the products which are demanded more, like that can be leveraged through those channels instead of the one for which the demand has fallen? How can the supply chain be put to use in this case?
Sure. So first of all, as I have shared during my presentation, you must have read about agility.
Yes,
and this is a lever which is very, very important. Now, when an organization is called agile, when the level of inventories which organization carry are very, very lean. Yeah. So take an example of I will give you an example of a juice. juice is a perishable product, wherein if you make the juice, it is only can be used in 6 months of your shelf life. After that, it has to be taken back from the tray. Now, in that kind of environment, if you are keeping huge amount of inventory and your demand suddenly dries up, the organization will lose a very, very big sum of money. Yeah. Hence, when you design your supply chain for these kind of product category, the organization has to work on two domains. One is your demand planning has to be very robust and very close to reality, wherein they don't give unnecessary projection without having proper market intelligence, and a lot of artificial intelligence tools are used. Because demand planning domain is completely not in your hand. You don't know, you know about what kind of scheme you will run. We know what kind of promotion I will give to consumer, and hence you can predict your own action. But you can never predict the action which a competition takes. A competition may be probably sudden reduce prices more than you. So there are software available, artificial intelligence softwares are available, which really predicts this demand. And then you have to take a pragmatic call that you have to manufacture for how much demand. Yeah. And then you have to predict near market. That is what is the job of supply chain. So that your inventory should always be very, very optimum. Yeah. One.
Yes.
The second thing is you are talking about an alternate scenario where the demand of a certain product is suddenly jumped up. Okay.
Yeah.
So what supply chain does is, supply chains, when it sets up its capacity, you have to set up your capacity very, very judiciously so that it runs at an optimum capacity utilization. Okay. So suppose you design your supply chain for a particular product wherein you say that I will operate my utilization of plant at 70%. Okay. So if demand goes up by 10-20% more, your manufacturing capacity is available to enhance your production. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
But there is a pitfall. The pitfall is that there is a cost of idle capacity. Somebody can say that you operate your plant at 50% capacity utilization, but then you are investing huge sum of money in your plant and you are keeping that plant idle. So the role of a good supply chain manager is to ensure and really identify what is the right optimum capacity utilization at which I will operate that category is. So your question is actually completely contributed by supply chain, and that is where efficiency and robustness of supply chain comes into play.
Thank you, sir.
Piyush, please go ahead.
Hi, sir. Thank you so much for talking to us this evening. My question is related to a bit to green supply chain and, greening the supply chain in general. So I just wanted to understand, because you've worked with Unilever, you're working with Dabur as well. What is the priority that these organizations give to greening their supply chain? And also, what are the challenges that they face in doing so? Because obviously you're working with multiple suppliers. And this is one question that I had. And also the second question was a kind of a follow-up. How is the information sharing amongst all these different players with regards to supply chain? Are they, because I understand that in the FMCG sector, the sharing of information about manufacturing doesn't happen so much, but does it happen with respect to supply chain to make it more efficient and, to make best practices better within the industry?
Okay. So first, I will take the first question, which is whether organizations are really caring about making it green. The answer is really very, very yes. Every organization, because consumers are becoming more aware. Not only consumers, many organizations have their shareholders to answer for. Unilever, for an example, has given a global commitment in a global forum that we will reduce our carbon footprint by half by 2025. We will reduce our non-recyclable plastic footprint by half by 2025. Similarly, you must have seen a lot of LinkedIn announcement by Dabur, wherein they have gone ahead in reducing the plastic amount of plastic. You must have just recently, 2-3 days back, Dabur has designed a toothpaste tube which doesn't require an outside carton at all. Why you need that complete carton is for branding and merchandising on the shelf, so that it looks better. It can be stand vertical so that consumer can see it easily when it goes to modern trade store. And the tube is designed in a way where the cap is designed in a way that you can keep the tube without the help of a carton steady and vertical on the shelf, so that it is very, very visible as well. So every organization is really focused on that. I will give you another example, which is a sourcing of lot of raw materials. So a lot of FMCG product is actually agri-based. So Unilever, you must have heard about Kisan sauce. It procures a lot of tomato from the farmers. And our organization as a company, Unilever always ensures that it buy farmers tomato from farmers who do cultivation through sustainable route, wherein there are many companies like Rainforest Alliance globally, which gives certificate to the farmer of that they are doing farming which is renewable and sustainable. So they are not using fertilizers which deteriorates productivity of the land. So organizations have gone up to that extent. And some of the companies actually are using blockchain to understand that this entire thing is very, very visible. So in many countries which are evolved countries for Unilever, you can really backtrack through the batch number on the product, that from which farm that tomato has come and whether sustainable farming happens for that or not. And these records are in public domain. Okay. Take an example of Dabur. Dabur uses a lot of herbs. Yeah. And Dabur themselves have actually really started teaching farmers as to how to cultivate those herbs, because as the generations are changing into farmer, jadi booty kaun banayega? There are many farmers who are not aware that those kind of jadi booties, how they can be made. So Dabur actually runs institute wherein they invite farmers and train them how to really grow those kind of herbs in their farms. They effectively earn much more than producing a different kind of thing. So all these things are happening. Similarly, organizations are investing big time in reducing the footprint of their manufacturing and energy footprint. So sustainable sourcing of power, whether it is through sources of wind energy, through it is solar energy, many organizations are doing. But to your second question, whether the information is shared between companies, right now in India, I don't see it happening in a big way. Globally, there are alliances between various companies. So in Copenhagen or anywhere in World Economic Forum, when the meet happens, CEOs of many companies exchange their ideas. But I think there is a lot needs to be done to really leverage the potential, because if we want to fight this battle jointly, it has to be shared. You are absolutely right. But whether it is happening today, only in bits and pieces and not in a very, very structured way. Another reason for this is that only really big companies are driving it, because whatever we say, actually we are the evolved people of the country who has a lot of education, lot of understanding. Many consumers in India, while they are appreciative of the fact that environmental sustainability is good, but they are not willing to pay for it. And hence, whatever you do in the supply chain, it should not add to cost. And hence, many companies, smaller companies, are not very focused about it. So work has to happen on that front as well through government, and many big companies are liaising with government to actually make laws so that it really benefits bigger organized organization, because a lot of pollution, most of the pollution in fact happens by organizations which are not organized. And unless we prevent those organizations to operate, it will give consumer choices which are not sustainable. And then big organization also are forced to give consumer those kind of cheaper products and which are not environmentally sustainable. So work has to happen in that domain as well.
Thank you,
Does it answer your question?
Yes, sir. Yes. You went one step further and told me the limiting factors as well. So thank you for that.
So, we'll end the session here. And I'm Yash. Both the companies that you're working with are quite dear to me, as my father worked with Dabur for almost 17 years. And my brother Veer worked at Unilever. He probably even worked with you for some time. And I think today's session, we have covered a large spectrum of FMCG, and it was not only from supply chain background, but also from, operations, marketing, strategy. And it has been really informative where you have correlated the story and evolution of, and the future challenges that FMCG has. And something coming from an industry stalwart like you, which we would probably not learn from any textbooks. I'm sure that many of us who want to enter into the FMCG industry and also in the supply chain management have learned a lot today. And I would like to thank you on behalf of Executive PGDM program at XLRI Jamshedpur for taking your time out and enlightening us on the immense knowledge in your field. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me questions. It actually opens up my thought process always. I do not have the privilege of getting educated from an institute as premium as XLRI. I learned on the job while working from people like you who really bring a lot of insight into the organization. And I wish you all the very, very best. Sky is the limit. Just gain as much knowledge as you can and really prosper in the life. Anytime everybody know my LinkedIn profile. If you want any clarification on anything, you can connect with me. I will be happy to revert to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
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 Thank you, sir.